So we should talk about what might be the ideal mid-patch activity and get into some predictions and speculation as to what's going to come in the Midnight expansion. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, your bubble of cope while the world around us gets crazier and crazier. You can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more WoW coverage, and catch me where I'm live. Midnight will be announced during Gamescom. It's news that should come as, well, no surprise for us here in the channel. I've been keeping a close watch on dates and patterns because, well, what else would I be doing in my spare time? Studying routes for keys? Crazy. Anyway, now that it's more or less official, you can bet that despite knowing the name of the expansion and that it's basically going to be like Season 2 of the World Soul Saga, there's still plenty of room for speculation or demands from players, and of course, possible leak season episodes. It's already started with the whole Void Demon Hunter spec, which I'm gonna be a healthy skeptic over. I mean, the point is, it's got folks ignited over what's next, and we'll be covering all that stuff shortly. I just want this weekly to be more about the excitement and hype for what's next, because, hey, who doesn't love that roller coaster of emotion? Now that we have another milestone in the books, let's refer back to our handy-dandy list of predictions, which is updated with a few more bullet points. We have the later part of August for Gamescom, which will be right at the heels of Season 3, with us eager folk looking at Wowhead and live streams for what happens at the end of this final raid. But then we reach the murkier parts of the timeline, patches 11.2.5 and 11.2.7, where it's hard to say what happens when, if at all. Now, I'm talking about the likely player housing preview, which is pretty much confirmed. I mean, like, I seriously have it on tape, I just can't legally post it, which is kind of annoying, but we don't know details of it. Like, will it be just testable on the PTR? Will it be an early release on Live Realms? And if so, is it going to be for everyone or just people pre-ordering and, so on and so forth? There's also the Legion Remix, which is definitely 100% confirmed, and there's the kind of spooky event that the devs alluded to during their PAX East panel. We just won't know details for a while. I have a feeling the spooky event is going to happen during the 11.2.5 timeline because it's going to be October, Halloween, and all that, and it's going to happen throughout that patch and might end before 11.2.7. Housing is kind of a toss-up because it's less likely to be an event, it's just going to exist going forward. So I feel like, letting it cook longer will make housing worth the wait. That, and we'll still be in the heavy parts of Season 3. Like we've seen in Season 2, they don't want to serve players a full table of activities too close together. So 11.2.7 is what I'm gonna say kicks off the 3-month home stretch, or the lull, whatever you want to call it. We're going to get the story leading us to Midnight, but the remaining activities are more or less standalone things. The Legion Remix, the housing early access, a chance for, for folks to get meta achievements and all that, and collect mogs, and so on and so forth. I still predict that somewhere in this window is a Season 4-ish experience because, believe it or not, there are gamers who aren't interested in housing or the temporary power fantasy / collection events that is the remix. Now, when I say it's Season 4-ish or a Season 4-like experience, I'm going to take some guesses and say that it's going to be kind of like the turbo boost from Season 2, only it happens a little bit later in the season. So instead of a full gear reset and a 40 item level bump, they're going to just add some extra upgrade levels to our existing gear, but also open up the other 2 raids, or even throw in the chip or dinar system, and even add the remaining War Within dungeons into the pool for gamers to get like a really high Mythic Plus score. Now, despite some initial griping, word on the street is the Turbo Boost has been pretty successful at stimulating folks into pushing a little bit further, a little bit higher than they could, but could do less of that drip feeling that comes with the likes of Season 2 chips and the Overcharge Belt as examples. So an end of expansion Turbo Boost sounds like a good compromise of giving players more to do without a gear reset, while still giving us that last hurrah. Or of course, they can do nothing, but it just feels like a nice meaty delivery of activities to close out the War Within. But let's see how wrong I am over the coming months. Is 11.1.7 the most proper way to do a mid-patch is kind of a ridiculous question because we're going to have takes from all over. We're going to have different and conflicting opinions. But let's look back at what this patch entailed. One, it had some story stuff. Now, I agree with many who think we woulda, coulda, shoulda had more lead up that takes us directly to Koresh in the upcoming patch and season because, well, even I'm feeling a bit of whiplash because we were in Undermine at first, and then we're off to Arathi Highlands, and then now we're off to space. Maybe we'll get more questing in this patch and it's encrypted maybe, or we'll get a cinematic, which is kind of okay, but we did at least get some important story, namely the update of the state of things back home, which we got very little of since the end of the Fourth War outside of books and comics. Story aside, we're in the middle of a significant leveling event in Turbulent Timeways. It's a nice little bonus thing to have at the tail end of a season when a lot of people are done with their primary obligations, but they're not really taking a break from the game. And this coming week, and for the next month, it's a big old collectathon with increased drop rates of transmog and mounts from legacy content all the way up to Shadowlands. That's a way more significant reach than a smaller event like Nightfall, or an updated event like Horrific Visions, as this particular increased drop rate event, it affects many expansions, many years worth of farming. I'm sure more than a few of us would love to see these increased drop rates be a more permanent thing. I mean, that's not hard to argue. But I also have to admit, giving temporary bonuses like this is an insidious and, well, kind of a clever way of getting players excited to come through. It keeps players occupied, and it's fairly easy to implement, at least I think, which possibly frees up developer focus for other things. I've seen a lot of chatter from folks suggesting how devs should shift focus from things that we, as in not really we, but people speaking for us, like we don't like, and the developers should instead give us things that we do want. While I don't quite agree with that sort of sentiment, I want to keep the spotlight on the way this patch is playing out and observe how we go through the motions. The question I have is, are there very simple ways to keep WoW players occupied and engaged, like, events that award more experience and existing cosmetics as opposed to the more conservative power creep we've been getting throughout this season? With the weekly chips and the belt level gains. As much as we would, again, want permanent increases to XP and item drops and, maybe permanent time walking or the ability to get holiday items anytime, are staggering bonuses effective enough to feel good while not feeling bad if people skip out? Okay, so Midnight. It's going to be officially announced in a bit less than 2 months. So it's a ways off, but it's never too soon to start wishlisting or, making demands to the WoW team, what we want and what they'd better be working on or else. So I'm going to mouth off some favorite ideas, things that I've heard, other predictions and wishes, and, we're going to try to keep the energy positive. Let's not get all armchair dev-like and talk about how, well, this and that is not feasible. There are no dumb ideas, except for WoW going free to play. Like, come on, dude. I'm hoping to see, along with the announcement, like right after the end of the trailer, a release date. I doubt they'll actually do it. They've been announcing release dates only a few short months out lately, but the team has been very on point while hitting dates to the point where I'd be surprised to see a break in our predicted schedule outside of like the estimated holiday break and the length of the pre-patch. Like that can change a little bit. I do expect them to throw out a big old soon for the alpha and the beta though. It's going to be 7 months between the announcement and when we think Midnight is going to launch in March or so, and the test cycle has only been about 5 or so months long. I'd rather not wait until August, but I expect by this time we're going to learn a lot more about player housing, from outdoor decor to crafting to neighborhoods. I wonder if they're going to go as far as to have like demo stations at Gamescom for people to play with the feature, but I can't imagine like half an hour or so to be nearly enough time for players to like even learn how it works, let alone sink their teeth into it. We're already told a stat squish is going to happen, and we're not going to know until the time comes, but I do wonder if we're going to get another stat squish after the saga is over, so, well, hear me out. Right now, numbers are getting kinda crazy, which is why they're gonna likely do a squish for Midnight. But for the sake of consistency, I think it would have been ideal to do these sort of squishes like at the start of every World of Warcraft saga. It just didn't happen to make it for the War Within. Now, something like that would make sense as we enter these new eras, but this is also the first super expansion we're getting, and when it's over, they might not want to do this again anyway. I hope when they talk about Midnight and what zones we'll be traveling to, they give a kind of a spoiler and they talk about the World Soul Saga as a whole. Because there's so much story that we've seen in Khazalgar that's only been touched on, as if we're only on the first season of a larger story, which we technically are, but it'd be helpful to get some reassurance from the developers that throughout Midnight and The Last Titan, we'll be traveling between all these different landmasses and continuing on these stories as we chase the latest threats. It would feel like a very awkward saga if we had, what they call a huge story, but it pans out like we're moving from one room to the next and then closing the door behind us. Like that's how it tends to be with WoW expansions. They talked up a revamp of Quell the Lost, but I'm hoping the revamp extends to basically the northern chunk of the Eastern Kingdoms, which would be a very large revamp. It's going to potentially feel very awkward seeing this, huge 2026 landmass cast in the shadow over the dingy south. I don't see them doing a full-on cataclysm-like change to both continents at the same time, but I'm also not ready to take that off the table yet either, which would mean Midnight is hugely ambitious, and I hope again that their storytelling takes us to all sorts of different locations. I think the wait time for dissolving the faction divide has been about long enough, and it's time to get rid of them last barriers that make it a pain in the ass for people to connect. I want the Guild Finder to no longer be faction restricted. I want to not have to jump through battle tag shaped hoops to invite other people. I want to be able to random queue into cross-faction raid finder and heroics and time locking. The Fourth War, it's been a while, it's long over, and since then there's only really been one faction, the Champions of Azeroth. I think the players behind these champions are ready to be treated like that. I would really like to see class changes that let the tanking role, because that's what I do, let the tanking role lean harder into both a tank and a support role, where depending on the class, the tank could help supplement healing or damage reduction or throughput for the party or the raid. At the moment, tanking is about achieving just enough self-sustain and battlefield control that you can then focus on dishing damage, and that feels kind of limiting, kind of restrictive. Maybe that part doesn't have to change too much, but I don't know. I would like to have some more situational buttons or rotation that's more of a group contribution than a personal one. There are 5 classes that still aren't shared across all the races. There's Demon Hunters, there's Evokers, there's Shaman, Paladin, and Druids. Now, out of the 5, Shaman and Paladin are the closest to being ready for the mainstream, and Paladins especially, they've already had a story that created a new order that might be inclusive to all who want to sign up. I can see either, Shaman or Paladin race class combos being available for Midnight, definitely for the Last Titan, but sooner is better than later. By the way, some folks are still waiting for the Pandaren Heritage Armor, which could come during Season 3 of this expansion for all we know, but we might as well ask for it now. Probably an unpopular take, but I'd rather not see new races outside of the Heronir at least, because it feels like the cat's out of the bag already. I would rather see more focus on existing race customizations and model updates, and most important, story to get us back to speed on what's going on with our favorite races. I'm sure many of you who champion a particular race have lots of questions after so many years. Blood Elves, they're very likely to get their lore update soon, but hey, what about the others left by the wayside? On the transmog side of things, I'd really like to see an overhaul of how transmog works. I've talked about this one for a while. On top of transmogging individual pieces, I want to take the wardrobe slots that we have and be able to customize those at a cost, but then switch between these however I like without a cost. These days we get all these ensembles and appearances begging us to set up multiple appearances, trying to actually enjoy it past what we see in the collection window, as in, we want to transmog our actual characters. That gets super expensive in the long run. Now that said, they could always do something more simple and just reduce the cost of transmog too. And also for Moggin itself, I think it's time to let us transmog gloves individually and achieve that asymmetric look. I think it would be cool to have that one beefy gauntlet or make it look like you've been partially possessed. And now that we've seen dyes and housing, I really hope to someday see armor and weapons be given the same treatment. Obviously that's a lot harder. A piece of armor is reshaped for every possible race and gender combo, but the team shouldn't be afraid of some extra elbow grease if they want to give something gamers have been asking for years. Imagine someday, whether it's a new armor set or stuff from the past, we'll be able to mix things up however we like, and then match or contrast colors in our own stylish way. Or we can hit the random button and cause a seizure or two, no big deal. And since we're in pie in the sky, pull this out my ass territory, I want to see a new kind of war mode that feels like an alternate reality of World of Warcraft. Like you turn on war mode and then boom, every zone looks like a battleground with zones to control and defend. There's wagons and people to escort, and NPCs are fighting all the time as if it's like a MOBA and we can help support them. Now personally, I'm not a fan of how Blizzard restricts outdoor PvP to the chest that drops from the sky or the one world quest per zone. I'm not even that big on PvP these days anyway, but I just think it would be neat to have an outdoor mode where there's constant conflict and we can participate in the push. And if the other factions in the vicinity, they can push right back. So in a way, it would kind of default as PvE with PvP rewards, but once players of the opposite faction participate together, then killing each other, I don't know, maybe it nets better stuff. And I'm gonna stop here, at least for now, because we would be here all freaking day with our wants and our demands, but maybe I'll revisit this topic periodically as we get closer to Gamescom. That's gonna be the show, but I wanna take an extra moment to talk about a movement called Stop Killing Games. It's an initiative over on the EU trying to gain ground, and there's no better way to describe it other than to read right off their site. Here we go. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games that have sold to customers. An increasing number of video games are sold effectively as goods, with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. This practice is a form of planned obsolescence and is not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is largely untested in many countries. The language might feel a little bit too urgent in my book, but I think it helps to get the point across. While most of my audience here in the channel are based on the US, the feeling applies to us everywhere. I don't think there's enough to protect consumers from the event where the games on our cartridges and discs and hard drives don't work, not even because we don't have the right console or hardware, but because we have to connect to the internet for it to operate, and the connection on the other end no longer exists. There's a good bit of discussion going on across the internet. Maybe there's a little bit of misinformation, maybe there's a bit of drama. There are tons of gears and nuance behind what seems like a very simple statement, but the general sentiment, at least to me, it makes a lot of sense. Where it's applicable, I think there ought to be some strict guidelines to allow games to continue operating long after patches are no longer produced or the studio behind it shuts down. And not every studio has the opportunity to go back later and make it so their game continues working offline. There's a lot of distracting voices out there who are super overthinking this. Like, they're trying to litigate this whole thing on social media and forums and Twitch chat of all places, and that's not what this is about at all. Most of us, at least, aren't lawmakers or engineers, but the point of this petition is to get these people talking, to show them that you care. And if this does go through, that's when the conversations can start happening and we can commentate and give feedback. A link to the petition is in the video description, and let's wrap things up with a big thanks to folks hanging out in the streams. You folks have always been great company. Lots of love to our fellow patrons, and we can't forget about you. Viewer, you made it to the end, you fed the algorithm. So let's stand vigil for more housing news next week, while we farm the heck out of the planet for mongs and mounts. I hope you join me for it. Please like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.